Okay, let's set the scene. It's a summer of 1944, and this brutal 3-week battle is absolutely raging for control of just one tiny island in the Pacific. But what was at stake here? Well, it wasn't just about reclaiming American territory. No, this was a critical stepping stone, maybe the stepping stone to finally ending World War II. So today we're diving into the story of the fight to take back Guam. Now, you've got to be wondering, right? I mean, out of all the countless islands scattered across the massive Pacific Ocean, why this one? Why pour so much blood, so much steel into this one little speck of land? Well, the answer, as we're about to find out, is something real estate agents have been saying for years. It's all about location, location, location. See, for both the United States and Japan, Guam was way more than just another island. It was, you could say, the strategic linchpin. The entire campaign in the Marianas, which had the codename Operation Forager, by the way, was basically built from the ground up with one goal in mind: capturing this absolutely crucial piece of territory. And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It shows this huge clash of strategies. On one side, you have the Americans. For them, it was all about offense, pushing forward. They desperately needed airfields close enough for their brand new B-29 Superfortress bombers to start hitting Japan's industrial centers. But on the other side, you have Japan, and for them, it was a totally desperate defense. Guam was a key part of what they called their absolute national defense zone, and that was a line they believed they had to hold literally no matter what it took. And hey, you don't just have to take my word for it. The U.S. Fleet Commander, Admiral Ernest J. King, he summed up the American thinking just perfectly. He knew that getting control of the Marianas, and especially Guam, wasn't just about planting a flag on some land they used to own. Not at all. It was about severing Japan's vital supply lines and getting into the perfect position for that final, decisive push. Okay, so let's talk about the actual forces that were squaring off for this massive clash. You've got the Americans, and they're bringing just overwhelming power to the fight. But the Japanese defenders, they were dug in deep, they were experienced, and they were absolutely prepared to fight to the very last man. You know, when you just look at the raw numbers on paper, the story seems pretty one-sided. The U.S. 3 Amphibious Corps, led by Major General Roy Geiger, had this huge force of almost 66,000 troops, and they were going up against a Japanese garrison of just 18,500, commanded by Lieutenant General Takeshi Takashina. So yeah, do the math. That's a solid 3-to-1 advantage for the Americans. But as anyone who studied the Pacific War knows, numbers on paper can be really deceiving. The fight for every single inch of Guam was going to be a brutal, bloody, hard-won battle. So, the invasion itself. The American assault was actually supposed to kick off in mid-June, but it got pushed back. Why? Because the fighting on the nearby island of Saipan was just so incredibly fierce. But here's the thing. That delay, it turned out to have a silver lining. It gave the Americans time to unleash one of the longest, most intense pre-invasion bombardments of the entire war. I mean, just try to imagine this. For 13 straight days, warships and aircraft just relentlessly pounded the Japanese positions, day and night. Then you had the underwater demolition teams, the original frogmen, working under constant fire to clear hundreds of obstacles from the landing beaches. They were literally paving the way for the main assault, which was set for W-Day, July 21st. All right, so here was the game plan, a classic pincer movement. The idea was to land on 2 different beaches on either side of the Orote Peninsula, which would let them grab the super important Apra Harbor. You had the 3rd Marine Division hitting the beaches up north at Assen, and the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade landing down south at Agate. And guess what? Both of them ran straight into a solid wall of mortar and artillery fire. This quote you see here from Brigadier General Shepard, I mean, it just says it all, doesn't it? Sent at the end of that first brutal day. The cost was incredibly high right from the get-go, but the resolve was just unshakable. And despite all the chaos, despite the terrible casualties, they did it. The beachheads were established. But listen, getting ashore, that was just the first step. The easy part, if you can believe that. The battle for Guam quickly turned into this savage, up-close and personal fight in the dense jungle, the steep ravines, and the fortified caves all over the island's interior. Okay, so fast forward 4 days after the landing. The Japanese commander, General Takashina, decides it's now or never. He throws absolutely everything he has left into one massive, coordinated counterattack. The goal was simple, and it was brutal. Drive the Americans right back into the sea. They even had infiltrators attacking rear areas. We're talking field hospitals here, in a desperate all-out assault. It was a huge gamble, and it failed. And the cost was just catastrophic. The Japanese lost something like 3,500 men in that one single night of fighting. It was an absolutely devastating blow that essentially broke the back of the island's organized defense. So after that failed counterattack, the battle just became a grim, grinding slog. It was now up to the American forces to root out defenders from these heavily fortified positions on the high ground, places like the Orote Peninsula and the Fonte Plateau. And they had to use everything they had: tanks, flamethrowers, and just the sheer, raw determination of the infantry. And this right here, this was the final, desperate message from Lieutenant General Obata. He's the one who took over after the first commander, Takashina, was killed in the fighting. His words just capture the complete and utter futility of the Japanese position, as their defenses were just crumbling under that relentless American advance. And then finally, on August 10th, the word came down. The island was officially declared secure. But here's the thing. Even with the main organized battle over, the fighting wasn't really finished, not by a long shot. For thousands of Japanese soldiers, the war on Guam was about to continue for a very, very long time. So the Americans had won, but that victory came at a really heavy price, and it would end up reshaping both the island of Guam and the entire Pacific War. The battle itself was over, but its legacy, well, that was just getting started. Let's talk about the human cost, because it was just staggering. American forces had about 7,800 casualties, but the Japanese garrison was, well, it was virtually wiped out. Over 18,000 were killed. Only about 1,250 were captured by the time the war ended. And so tragically, we can't forget that over 600 Guamanian civilians were also killed, caught in a brutal occupation and then the crossfire of the liberation. And remember what I said about the fighting not being over? Well, for thousands of Japanese soldiers, the war just didn't end. An estimated 7,500 of them simply vanished into the dense jungle, creating this dangerous and truly tragic final chapter to the battle. And this is where the story gets almost unbelievable. One of these holdouts, a sergeant named Shoichi Yokoi, survived completely alone in a cave for, get this, 28 years. 28 years. He was finally discovered by some local hunters in 1972, basically a living ghost from a war that had ended decades earlier. So with the island finally secure, the transformation was immediate. And it was absolutely massive. The Seabees and Army engineers went to work, building these enormous airfields, like Northfield, that became the launch pad for the B-29 raids on Japan. Opera Harbor was turned into a major naval base. Guam even became Admiral Nimitz's forward headquarters. I mean, this one battle turned Guam into the strategic American fortress that it still is today. And that really brings us to our final thought here. The battle itself is history, of course, but its echoes, they're still there. Every single year on July 21st, Guam celebrates Liberation Day. It's this powerful, living reminder of how a single, brutal conflict from the past can continue to shape and forge an entire island's identity for generations to come.